What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. And yesterday I released a video called I Love the Pyromancer, which was basically just a montage of me doing a very fast, my best to date run of Boomtown. And I had some questions in the comments, but I thought that I would also just share the build itself, the mods that I use, as well as some of the strategy behind playing the Pyromancer this way. And that's basically it. So let's go right ahead and jump right in. So I'm just going to be moving my face around on the screen here as we can look at all of the different parts. We're going to go ahead and start with the skills. One last thing, the idea obviously of this build is to try and do CT15s as fast as possible in a solo environment, even though this build works very well in a carry scenario, and it is the build of the Pyromancer that I've been using to do community carries and all of that basically for the last 2 weeks on my streams, which you should definitely check out. So keep an eye out for those, usually on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And at this moment in time, it looks like at least one of those 2 nights will usually be a carry event. So keep an eye on the Discord, on this channel, on my Twitter. All of the socials are linked in underneath, and give it a look. But in any case, here we go. So specifically from a skills perspective, this is a heat wave, ash blast, and overheat build. So of course, using the Akari set, which is the most powerful set that the Pyromancer has access to. So if we then go to the class themselves, if I can just move myself down over here, you'll notice that I'm using top tree, but I am, however, dipping down here to just get as much cooldown reduction as possible. We're going to jump back to the skills just now so we can see just how good the cooldowns are with this. But essentially, you're just trying to pick up everything, making sure to pick up hot situation, which is really good with Ash Blast. And then not bothering picking up burning situation at the end here, because you don't really need the additional weapon damage. This is basically all about the anomaly, and that's it. And of course, as I've said, dipping down here to still get wildfire as well, so that you get the maximum amount of cooldown on your skills. If we go back to the skills here, and I just move myself up here again, then you'll notice that I have a 6.7 second heat wave, I have an 11.6 second ash blast, and I have a 6.6 second overheat, which is really good, especially the ash blast, which usually, if you're not running top tree, is around 17 seconds cooldown. So that 5 to 6 seconds makes a huge difference. And then of course the overheat also being a fairly low cooldown, but that's also due to some of the mods which I have. And then of course really fast heat wave, or heat waves in this case, because I have multiples, which are also really good. Then if we shoot over to the actual inventory and the items, I am using a death shield with fortress and shadow comet on. That is the primary weapon that I use to engage enemies from, let's say, medium to long range, and I usually open up most engagements with a shadow comet, followed by some abilities like you know, my combo or something like that, and then just keep piling on the shadow comets. It does accumulate quite a bit of damage, and it's really effective. Once I get within close range, I usually swap to the Anomaly for 1 or 2 applications of Moaning Winch, which I also have Fortress on this, so just a maximum amount of damage from that. Now I do also have Moaning Winds on my pistol, but I don't do the whole swapping between 2 primaries and the pistol as well. I think that would obviously improve the speeds and the times of the runs, you know, even better. But it's something that as of yet I haven't really worked into the role yet, even though I did put Moaning Winds onto the pistol just for, you know, if I need it. Now if we go over to the actual pieces here, I'm running 3-piece Akari, as I've mentioned, and I'm using the headpiece, the chest, and the legs. The reason for that being that I want all 3 pieces that have anomaly power on them, whereas the gloves and the boots don't have anomaly power on them from the Akari set, which is why I use these 3. Now the optimum loadout for any anomaly build, at least when it comes to the Pyromancer, happens to be anomaly power, status power, and cooldown reduction, which is not really present on the 3 Akari pieces that you wear, whereas mostly the Akari pieces favor skills, life leech, anomaly power, and then in some cases cooldown reduction, or in this case here status power. So it is quite important that on your 2 purple pieces of gear that you have, that you do use status power and cooldown reduction on there. Cooldown reduction is self-explanatory, it's really good, and status power also just means that your burns, as they tick for a lot bigger chunks of damage, and actually can end up killing weak enemies before you even execute your combo. Now starting at the top here, we'll just go through each one of the mods. So here I have Fire Tsunami and I have Ride the Wave. Could you do this build without Fire Tsunami? Sure. If you're really good at focusing your heat waves and hitting as many enemies as possible, then yes, but Fire Tsunami just makes it a lot more easier because it fires out in a much larger cone, and it's much easier to actually hit multiple enemies, which of course is what you want, because the set bonus is every enemy damaged by heat wave, as you can see at the bottom there, grants 50% anomaly power up to a maximum of 300%. So if you're hitting 6 enemies, then you're getting the maximum amount of effect from that. I also have Ride the Wave on here, which gives me my second heat wave, which is quite important. Can this build work with one? Sure, but the second heat wave, and you'll see as we go through the mods, makes a lot more sense. A third one could even potentially be really good, but is not necessary. I do kind of think that 2 heat waves is the sweet spot. When we go over to the chest piece, here I have Detonator on, which is essential because it essentially halves the cooldown of your overheat, which means that in some cases you could even cycle a off rotation overheat into your damage rotation, meaning that you fire, you heat wave, overheat, heat wave, ash blast, overheat, which is an extremely effective way of delivering a lot of damage in, you know, a certain area, or for instance on a boss for that matter. The second, and this is my only defensive ability that I use here, is the damage absorber. I found that the run and gun kind of build and how this works, where you're basically running into a room and sort of pathing your way through the enemies until you get the maximum amount of them clustered together so you can hit them with a big heat wave and get all that additional damage, you are going to have to soak up a little bit of damage. And yes, you can hit them with like a overheat or something like that to get some of that life leech into you from your skills life leech. But generally speaking, the additional 52,000 of armor that you get from damage absorber and that resistance of 10% gives me just enough survivability so that I feel that I can comfortably move in and out of combat and I don't have to worry too much about healing myself. The third item on my legs, I've got Anomaly Echo on here, which basically gives you additional firepower and anomaly power every time you activate a skill. I've got very, very low cooldowns with this build, so I'm constantly activating skills, and this is on a cooldown of 15 seconds. So you essentially, once you start combat, you have this buff available at all times, which is phenomenal. It's really great. On here is Master Consumer as well, which is the overheat can either consume burn or ash, and if it consumes both of them off a minion, the damage is increased by 150%. A lot of your additional damage with this kind of build comes from this particular skill. Master Consumer is really, really good, and of course it comes from the boots of the Akari set. So I dismantled my boots here and just added it to the pants here. If we go to the gloves, here I have Ash Increase range. Now Ash Blast by itself has quite a small range, especially when you put it up next to Overheat. And so this puts them almost in the same range differential. The difference being that Overheat is still slightly larger, and also that you have to remember that Ash Blast and Overheat apply differently. So what I mean by this is you'll notice that when you use Ash Blast, it moves like a wave out from you. So it's very important to bear this in mind when you're trying to pull off the very famous, combo of Ash Blast Overheat, that you have to allow time for the Ash Blast to actually hit the outer minions before you overheat, because otherwise you will actually trigger the overheat, which happens to be instant, unlike the Ash Blast, and then it won't actually benefit from the Ash Blast effect being present on that minion. It's actually very easy to see. It's a very noticeable effect. So if you try to use it, you'll notice that when you press Ash Blast, it moves out like a wave from you, as I said. Whereas when you press Overheat, it's essentially, instant, and it hits the guys right next to you and the guys far away from you at about the same speed. I also have Death Sentence on you, and this is really the part that I was looking to the most, the longest for in this build, and finally got it to drop over the weekend. And that is basically from the Torturer's mask. So the Torturer's set headpiece, you get Death Sentence. What this does is it increases your weapon damage and your anomaly damage against enemies affected by the skill of Ash Blast by 40 and 30% respectively for 5 seconds. So essentially what this means is it's an additional damage buff to one minute I Ash Blast something, this effect kicks into rotation for 5 seconds, and if I then shoot with my weapon with Shadow Comet and everything coming like that, it benefits from additional damage, but also any fire waves that I shoot after this basically do a lot more damage as well, or at least 30% more damage. But this produced a noticeable damage increase for me the minute I swapped this in. Now, the last piece that I have here has Phoenix Force and Burnt Out here, and I think here is where you have some opportunity for using something different. Not in the case of Burnt Out, because I would definitely consider having Burnt Out still on this character as well, just due to the fact that because I have 2 heat waves, it further on just augments my damage and increases the overall damage that the spells can push out, especially the Ash Blast and Overheat that comes after the heat waves. Phoenix Force is something that it's kind of hit or miss. You have some people that swear by it, or you also have some people that say it's broken and it doesn't work at all. But it noticeably increases my anomaly power, especially if I kill a large group of enemies. And again, this helps with the follow-up heat waves that you use, which a lot of the times, if you don't kill a captain or a boss or an elite or something like that, then they usually have maybe a little bit of life left, and the effect that you get from this coupled with 2 heat waves coming out of you is usually enough to seal the deal on that. Now you'll notice that this build does not have Captain Hunter on it, which is a standard sort of staple on everybody's builds when they're pushing CT15s. But I found that the inclusion of Death Sentence meant that I could take that off, because Death Sentence gives a 30% anomaly increase instead of 25% that you get from Captain Hunter, which only applies to Captain Hunter, whereas Death Sentence applies this 30% to basically everything that you attack. Even though it's just for 5 seconds. The point is that I had to choose to let go of something, and I chose to replace Captain Hunter with Death Sentence, and I haven't looked back. Now, one other thing that I would probably potentially test down the line, if I can get the right combination of pieces, is I might try to swap out Phoenix Force for Captain Hunter and see if overall, even because this build has no problem with dealing with trash, but sometimes you can get a, someone like Moloch, for instance, on frontline, which is quite, difficult to get dead on CT15, and they take a little bit of time to kill, where Captain Hunter might actually make that a little bit better. But nonetheless, I doubt it would make that big a difference, and I really do feel that this is probably the best that I'm going to be able to get this character set up. And I'm very happy with the speeds and the clear speeds that I get with this, especially the fact that I can still do relatively decent carries with this as well, and I don't have to augment or change any pieces, so I can play this solo and really enjoy myself, and I can also carry my friends and viewers, and also don't have a problem with that. So that's it for the build. I hope that helped anybody. If they needed to understand any of the mods or anything like that, please go ahead and mention in the comments below if you have any questions regarding this, or anything that you would suggest that I should try to replace one of these mods with, and maybe you've seen better success with that. But other than that, that's the build as it stands there. Thank you very much for the support. Thanks for joining and watching. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if this is the kind of thing that you enjoy. I am still playing a crap load of Outriders, I'm not gonna lie. I know the game has like super bad word of mouth and everybody hates it and everybody loves to hate on it, but I am still enjoying it quite a lot, and I'm really getting into the Trickster and the Devastator now, so keep an eye out for videos coming on those characters soon. Other than that, it's just really important for me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and an awesome evening wherever you are. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me.